Welcome to Modern Latin America in 15 minutes. My name is Kim Richardson, and today we are going to discuss colonial background of Latin America. Even though this is a modern Latin American course, we really want to understand a few important things that lead up to the modern period. First off, in 711 AD, Muslims came up from North Africa and invaded what was then the Visigothic kingdoms of Iberia. Iberia is this peninsula right here, which makes up today Portugal and Spain, but at that time was a number of Visigothic kingdoms. They pushed all the way up until they were finally defeated at the Battle of Tours, and then, for the most part, from 711 AD until 1492, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, this period is called the Reconquista. This is very important for the history of Iberia and the Iberian possessions later on. One of the most important things to occur is in 1469, the heirs to the thrones of Castile and Aragon, Castile right here, Aragon right here, Ferdinand Isabella got married. Now this is going to eventually lead to what we now know as Spain, and this is important. They are going to be known as the Catholic monarchs because they're going to be even more proactive in trying to rid Spain, Portugal had already done so, Spain of both Muslims and then Jews as well. This Reconquista is very important. The surest path to wealth and honor, says a recent book, lay in plunder and conquest. And an hidalgo's, or gentleman's honor, was defined by his capacity to vanquish the Muslims and seize their land and wealth. Indeed, that is the case. Portugal began what's known as the Age of Overseas Exploration first, under Prince Henry the Navigator. He was the son of the king, and then brother of another king, and he would never become king, but he became very good at sailing, and he began the age of overseas exploration under the Portuguese. There's lots of reasons for this, but one of the great reasons is because the Portuguese had already defeated the Muslims in the Reconquista and had more time and money on their hands. They proved that the best way to sail east is to sail down the west coast of Africa as early as 1487 to 1488. This great voyage of Bartholomew Diaz sailed all the way into the Indian Ocean before returning home. Christopher Columbus disagreed with this. He believed that the best way to sail to the east is to sail west, which the Portuguese disagreed with. The Portuguese were right, as they proved later on in 1497 to 98 under the voyages of Vasco da Gama as they went into India and became, in the 1400s and 1500s, one of the world's greatest seafaring empires. In 1492, however, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He sailed 4 different times to the Americas. He died believing that he discovered a westward voyage to Asia, believing that he had landed on the islands outside of Japan and China. Now there's a conflict. The Europeans and the Spanish and the indigenous peoples are now going to have a clash of civilizations, as some books call it. When they came back, Christopher Columbus and the Spanish convinced the Pope to divide the globe in half. This is called the demarcation line, which is official in 1493. However, at threat of war, the Portuguese was able to get it pushed west a little bit farther, and the Treaty of Tordesillas is established. Everything in the east part of this line, therefore, looking at this from this way, is going to belong to under the jurisdiction of the Portuguese. Everything in the west, the jurisdiction of the Spanish. Of course, there's no line in the middle of the ocean that says you're crossing the Treaty of Tordesillas line, so Portuguese got pushed farther and farther back, the Portuguese Brazil. That is why all of the Western Hemisphere, for the most part, belonged to the Spanish, except for Brazil, which belonged to the Portuguese, the Treaty of Tordesillas. There is going to be a clash of civilizations, which I wish I could discuss more in detail, between the Spanish and the indigenous peoples that they are coming and conquering. They're going to conquer in the name of gold because they want gold. They're going to conquer in the name of glory because they want glory. Who doesn't want to be rich and famous? And thirdly, they're going to conquer because they want to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that becomes very important as this clash of civilizations occur. The major civilization in the north is going to be the Aztec Empire, and down south is going to be the Inca Empire. There's lots of great civilizations in the Americas. People such as Hernan Cortes are going to lead the conquest of the Aztec Empire in Mexico, and people such as Francisco Pizarro and his colleagues are going to lead to the conquest of the Inca Empire in the south. In short, within a few decades, most of Spanish and Portuguese America are going to be conquered or dominated at least by the Europeans. Emphasis should be given on the labor system. Very important. But prior to the labor system, you have to note that there's a reason why the Spanish and the Portuguese were able to conquer, and that is because the indigenous peoples began to die. This is called the demographic catastrophe. Simply put, the American Indians had what's called virgin territory. They had not acquired, they had not gotten these diseases that in the old world they suffered from. There was no black plague in the Americas. There was no smallpox in the Americas. So when the Europeans came over and spread these diseases, the indigenous peoples died in droves. Well, it just so happens then that 90% of the population declined as a result of this. Beginning around the 17th century, the population slowly began to recover, but for the most part, this is going to take a drastic toll on the history of modern Latin America. The initial labor system that's going to come about is going to be Indian slavery, indigenous slavery in 1492 when Columbus came over. But pretty soon, the monarchs of Spain are going to say that's not very Christian-like, so they abolished, officially anyway, slavery. They're going to replace it with something called encomienda, which is a tributary system. This encomienda system, in which the Indians are forced to pay tribute, is going to be abolished thanks to people such as Friar Bartolomé de las Casas in 1542 with the new laws of the Indies. It's going to be replaced with something called repartimiento, which is a labor system in which the Indians are forced to provide labor to the Spanish crown. One of the most important things to then occur is going to be religious traditions. I want to emphasize this because the point is to emphasize what is going to come later, which is the modern Latin America period. The Native Americans had their religious traditions, and it was very important, such as this fertility goddess, Tonantzin. The Spaniards had their religious traditions. They were very Marianist, and so hence the Virgin Mary. These are going to be combined in figures such as the patron saint of Mexico, the Virgin of Guadalupe, in which you combine the old and the new, and then you create something which is quite different. The Virgin of Guadalupe is the patron saint again of Mexico. This is called syncretism, when you combine two things together. Now you could argue that it's assimilationism. Either way, it's a combination of two different religious traditions to form an overwhelmingly different religious tradition in Latin America than, for example, that is being practiced in Italy. They both might be Catholic, but they're not necessarily the same type of Catholic. This is the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe, a miraculous event. You can go visit this shrine. And it becomes a very cultural icon, the Virgin of Guadalupe. Everywhere this will occur. Inca Madonna, for example. Notice the syncretic features of this Inca Madonna. Puerto Rico. Notice that there's going to be all sorts of a dollar bill here and all different offerings here. It's going to be the religious syncretism here. Very important. Latin America is now going to be divided. Now that it's going to be conquered, it's going to be divided into viceroyalties. For the most part, there were two viceroyalties, New Spain and down here Peru. Soon, however, this one is going to be divided up into New Granada and then La Plata. Over here, you have the Portuguese. Once it's discovered, that's going to be made into the viceroyalty of Brazil. One of the most important things in Latin America is going to be race relations. Those that came from the old world, from Spain or Portugal, are known as peninsulares, from the peninsula. They are going to be the top dog of the fight, the top rung of the ladder. They're the most important. Underneath them, you have those whites that are born in the Americas, known as Creoles. Under the Creoles, you have the Indians. Indians, of course, are going to be second or third-rate citizens. But if you combine the two, Spaniards, either Peninsulares and Creoles, and Indians, you have a mixture of the two. Much of Latin America is going to later claim to be mestizo, the mixture of the different peoples. You have Africans that are going to be brought over in places, especially where you don't have large indigenous populations, and they also combine with other peoples to make mulattos. In other words, what you see here, the race in Latin America is going to be in a ladder. You can go up or down the ladder based on success, monetary success, money whitens. You can go up, but you can also go down, with the exception that Peninsulares are always going to be the top dog in the fight, no matter what. The emphasis of limpieza de sangre, cleanliness of blood, becomes very important. You know your genealogy, you know your history. The emphasis on honor is going to be very important. You must be have this honor, super important. The Portuguese, remember, get the eastern part, and they, as late as 1497 and 98, find a way to go, Vasco da Gama, remember I showed you this earlier, to go into India. After Vasco da Gama, a guy by the name of Pedro Alvarez Cabral was advised how to get to India, but he made a slight miscalculation, and he got to Brazil, where there were many indigenous peoples here that he encountered, and is going to send one ship back to Portugal to announce this discovery, and then the rest are going to go on to India. Now here, Brazil is going to, from the very get-go, be an export colony, the richest colony in the Americas. They first exported Brazil wood, hence the name Brazil, and then they're going to export, especially in the 1600s, late 1500s, 1600s, sugar, a major export, one of the wealthiest exports for the time, until other European countries began to take over. And then later on, they're going to export things such as gold, diamonds, 19th century coffee, later rubber. It's going to become an export colony and then country. Of course, the Africans that are going to be brought in, because they don't have any sedentary populations like the Aztecs, are going to be Africans. They're going to be brought in, and they are too going to mix in. Syncretized religions, candomblé, Shango, Macumba, are going to mix in to make a unique history, religious tradition in this region as well.